Today, we are talking about a really important topic. What are the essential labs that you need to uncover the root cause of your symptoms? And it's different than you might think. You might be going to your regular doctor, your conventional doctor, and thinking that you're getting all of the labs that you are supposed to be getting. But unfortunately, sometimes you are not getting those labs that you really need to uncover the root causes of your symptoms. And that could be a little bit different. So, we're going to talk about lab testing today. We're going to go over 4 main labs that we really like to use at Cleanbody. We'll also talk about some of the other labs we like to use if you work directly with us. But that includes things like food sensitivity, overall organ and systemic health, inflammation, autoimmune disease. We like to look at gut health, and then we like to look at toxins as well. So this can be really eye-opening for us and for you, especially if you are dealing with symptoms. It can really open your eyes to what are some of the things that are triggering those symptoms. So this is a really important topic if you are dealing with chronic issues. All right, so let's start with food sensitivity testing. So a food sensitivity test is checking for something a little bit different. I know a lot of us might be used to getting an allergy test from an allergist, and this is a little bit different. This is looking for a different immunoglobulin. And normally when you're getting an allergy test, you might be looking for an IgE, which is that immediate response, allergy response that, you eat something and then immediately you have a reaction. And food sensitivity is a little bit different. So this is going to be a different immunoglobulin. We look at IgGs. We can also look at other immunoglobulins like IgA, but this specific test we're talking about looks at IgGs. And these might be immunoglobulins that might cause a lower level response. They also might cause a response that you'll eat something and then maybe you don't even get a response until 3 whole days later. So it can actually be really difficult to understand what these are if you don't do testing. And today I am inviting Tori, one of our Cleanbody nutritionists, to help us out here and help us understand a little bit about these tests because, food sensitivity testing, you can't always take it at face value. You have to do a little bit of digging and understanding how to use these tests. So, Tori, how do we like to use food sensitivity testing at Cleanbody?
Yeah, absolutely. Food sensitivity testing, like you said, at face value isn't always exactly what it seems. For example, sometimes we come across people that run this test and it feels like panic because, 20 different foods pop up as something they're sensitive to, and they feel like, oh my gosh, it's everything I eat day to day. What can I eat? I don't have any choices anymore. I'm allergic to everything. And that's actually fairly common that we see that. And that isn't necessarily exactly what it sounds like. It can actually be a sign that the gut itself has some hyperpermeability going on, some intestinal permeability, which basically is, we call that leaky gut in our world, but the proteins from the foods that you're eating are making their way into the bloodstream, and the immune system, being really smart, is actually just making an immune response in response to proteins that are there that shouldn't be there. So that can be one way that we use this test. It kind of can confirm like a leaky gut. It can show, like you said, lower grade inflammation from certain foods, which can be really helpful if you already are kind of eliminating certain foods and still having some symptoms pop up. And this can kind of pinpoint more specifics on which foods we really need to be the most careful with. So there's a lot of different ways to use it. And I love that there's a few options for how many foods and other things that we test for at Cleanbody.
Yeah, so it can be really great because while we're in the midst of the healing process, these are foods we may want to think about removing, but again, it may not be something we want to do for a lifetime. So I think, we do have these available for direct order, but it is also really great to work with a practitioner to really understand how to unravel these tests. So we have one that is a food sensitivity basic, and then we have one that is a complete, which covers 209 foods, and it also covers things like additives and food coloring and things like that. So, that's a really good option to look at. And Tori said, that sometimes when there's so many food sensitivities, we might want to think about leaky gut. And so we will be talking about another test that can help us really understand leaky gut. But when we're looking at these tests, sometimes when there's so many foods that are there, we do need to think about leaky gut. And then this other test we're going to talk about can actually confirm that for us. But before we talk about that test, we're going to talk about toxic burden. So when we think about what might be causing or triggering inflammation in the body, triggering immune responses, we want to think about these external things that might be triggering those responses. So number one, we have food, which is where we started. And of course, that's so important because that's what you put in your mouth. And I do actually think that's one of the most important is what do you put in your mouth? But what you put in your mouth also has to do with the toxins in those foods. So, Tori, what kind of toxins can we find in our foods that we might also be able to uncover in the total tox burden test?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, there's potential to be a lot of toxins in food, especially modern day food. You mentioned food dyes on that food sensitivity test. I think you just said that. That can be a toxin right there. There can be heavy metals. There can be glyphosate, which is Roundup, a pesticide and herbicide. We can find mycotoxins in certain kinds of food. So the testing, what we do on the total tox burden can show us those environmental toxins, things that you're getting exposed to just in your environment, but also what you're putting in your mouth can absolutely contribute to those levels in the body as well.
Yeah, so this test specifically is a urine test. You're going to do a first morning urine. That's when the urine is going to be most concentrated. And basically, what you're seeing is the output of these toxins into your urine. So, number one, it's going to be good to see that your body is actually excreting these. But something that it can tell us is what you're being exposed to. And a lot of the times when we are seeing people with chronic symptoms, eczema, inflammatory issues, gut issues, headaches, hormonal issues, all of these things could have a root cause in the toxic burden. So let's start with environmental contaminants. Tori mentioned that some of the things in our food might be pesticides. There could also be preservatives like parabens. Then you want to think about, what you put on your body. So creams and lotions and things like that can also have parabens. We have a lot of plastic toxicity. So BPA, phthalates. If you're using a lot of fragrances, you might see phthalates in there as well. So these are so eye-opening because it starts to help you understand, oh my goodness, I have a lot of toxic exposure if you see a lot of these toxins coming up. And it can really help you to understand what you need to clean up in your environment, in your diet, etc. Heavy metals are also really important. So we are getting some of these heavy metals in our diet. So Tori, where are we getting them in our diet, the specific heavy metals?
Seafood is one really common place that we find levels of heavy metal. So it's really important that you find quality sources for seafood in particular. That's one that we can see high levels of mercury in certain kinds of fish. So be really careful there. And then even things like the way food is stored, canned foods can matter. Aluminum is a huge culprit that we see often on these testing, and that can even be from how you're cooking your food and what you're cooking it in. So it's not just the food itself, but it's also the food storage and the food preparation that you have to be concerned about as well.
Yeah, and then things that you wouldn't think have high levels of heavy metals might actually be culprits like rice, for example.
Yeah.
You might be eating, let's say, a gluten-free diet and eating a ton of rice. And unfortunately, there's arsenic in rice. So for rice, if that came up on this test, you might think about, okay, I want to choose California grown rice. Basmati, jasmine are going to be lower. And then white versus brown can also be an option there if you're really having those high levels of arsenic. So, sometimes we're actually eating really good foods that unfortunately can have these heavy metal exposures. And the last one, as Tori mentioned, are mold toxins. Now, mold toxins can be, found in our exposures to mold in our environment. And so a lot of that could be water damage in your home. You could see mold in your schools and your offices as well. And there are certain mycotoxins that would be related to those home or building molds. And so that can give us an idea of where we need to look. We need to look in your environment rather than in your food. And then there's also a lot of mycotoxins that come from food. So that can give us a better idea of, oh, okay, maybe we just need to hunt in your food. Maybe you need to do a better job with storing your food, not eating leftovers, eating certain foods, etc. This test can be really eye-opening, and then it can help us to understand what kind of detoxification process we need to put you through. If you have exposure to a lot of toxins, we cannot cleanse or detox you yet. We have to just limit those exposures first. Like, let's take away those exposures, let's support those organs, and then finally, let's get to the detox part. If somebody comes up on this test and they're having so many toxins, and then you start detoxing them, they are probably not going to be happy campers. They're going to have a lot of detox symptoms, especially if they're dealing with symptoms like skin symptoms. You might see those skin symptoms flare when you start detoxification. So these tests can be really helpful in helping us understand how to proceed with treatment even. So this is a little bit about what that test looks like, and it's really great broken up into the different sections so you can understand what sections you're having the most problem with. All right, and then the gut zoomer test is a gut test where we're collecting your poop, and actually you're collecting your poop at home. And this one is really cool because what we talked about earlier, that leaky gut issue, this can really help us to unravel that leaky gut issue. It can give us some markers to tell us whether you have leaky gut. And then it can also help us in terms of pathogens. We can see things like parasites, yeast, bacteria, viruses that can pose some health risk to you and maybe a root cause of your condition, whatever you might be dealing with, or symptoms that you might be dealing with. What are some other things that the gut zoomer can cover, Tori?
Yeah, it can show us the balance of bacteria in your microbiome, and that's really important. We have bacteria that should be there. It's kind of like our, good guys, the good army, and we can be missing like generals in that army. That could be a major issue if you've got some chronic conditions, if you don't have those good guys there. The pathogenic ones we just talked about, but obviously measuring if you have something there that's not supposed to be there. And then there can even be overgrowth of bacteria that is commensal, meaning it should be there, but it's not in the right amount. So I like to think of it as kind of like a garden that's supposed to have a balance of all different types of flowers. And maybe one of those flowers, even though it's beautiful, they kind of like took over. And so you need to bring balance back. We also can find out information on like inflammation in the GI tract, if there's any inflammatory processes going on. We can look at the way bile acids are working. If your pancreatic enzymes are breaking down food like they're supposed to, do you have enough of those? Is the bacteria making short chain fatty acids, which is really important for the health of the colonic cells. So we can figure out a lot of information from poop, and we tend to talk about poop a lot on these lives, but it's because it's really important, and what it looks like and what actually is in it. So this test is awesome. It's really thorough, and it gives us a ton of information.
Yeah, and if you're dealing with a skin condition, there is inherently an imbalance in your gut. So this can be really eye-opening. The microbiome of the intestine can be related to the microbiome on your skin. Leaky gut can be related to leaky skin. Inflammation in the gut leads to inflammation in the skin. So this can be so important if you're dealing with a skin condition. But honestly, if you're dealing with any chronic condition, typically the gut plays a big role in there, because so much of your immune system is actually in your gut, that a lot of the symptoms we experience are actually immune activation, and when that happens, the gut is typically a part of that picture. Okay. So yeah, we really love this test. And, there's a couple of other different types of gut tests we can use if we do work with you directly, and we can kind of make those decisions. But the gut zoomer is available for direct order on our website. So you can click the link in my bio if you're interested there. And there is a discount right now called Lab IG for $100 off these direct order labs. Okay. All right. And then last but definitely not least is just checking out the overall systemic health of your system, the organ health of your system. And this is kind of similar to maybe what your conventional doctor might do, but very, very different. So your conventional doctor might do, a couple of tests, maybe, 7 to 8 tests. And this lab that we might do is a lot of different tests. I mean, it is really checking out hormone levels, organ function markers, nutrient deficiencies, systemic inflammation, autoimmune markers. And often, all of these aren't done with your conventional doctor at your yearly lab test because your doctor typically is only ordering kind of the basics. And then, only hormone labs are only ordered if there's an imbalance. But what we see functionally is that there can be imbalances even before you're seeing severe symptoms in that area. And this is what we call really truly doing preventive medicine, is really looking at different reference ranges. So what you might see on a conventional lab test is a specific reference range, but that reference range might be a reference range that is giving us the idea of, okay, do you have a disease or not? Do we need to give you a drug or not, is really the question there. And what we're trying to do is look for optimal function, which is really just a different question. And so we might actually make those reference ranges a little bit tighter. And so an example here is your kidney eGFR. A conventional range is for this to be above 60. Now, our range functionally is we want to see this more above 90. And that is because at above 90, that's where we're going to see really optimal function. Now, this function does drop as we age, it drops as we get more unhealthy, more toxic. And so between 60 and 90, we might, conventionally not do anything. We might say, okay, yep, you're fine until you hit 60, 50. And at 61, your doctor still doesn't care about this marker. But at 61, we already know that kidney function is declining. And so we want to do something about it between that 60 and 90 range. And so that's kind of how we look at these labs a little bit differently. And this is truly preventive medicine that we're doing. We're trying to fix the problem before it becomes a full-blown problem. And in conventional medicine, we're typically waiting for that full-blown problem to happen. And then we give you a drug. It's saying that that's an answer, and it's truly not an answer because it's really just kind of helping that symptom to go away instead of really getting to the root cause. And for kidney, what are the root causes? Sometimes it's really as simple as just drinking more water. Sometimes it's as simple as doing something like that. And so changing your water consumption can actually change your filtration rate of your kidney. Okay. If you do decide to work with us, so we do have labs available through direct order, which means you can order those labs directly. You'll get a discovery consultation that comes with that so that we can kind of help you to navigate where to go from there. But another way to work with us is to actually book a consultation first before ordering labs so that we can actually assess what labs you actually need and what are the best for you. There are other labs we can do in addition to the 4 that we mentioned here. We can look at your nutritional status with a Nutri-Eval or a cellular nutrition assay. We can look at genetics. We can look at your neurotransmitters if you're having any, anxiety, depression, etc. We can look if you have Lyme disease, if you're having some weird symptoms that look like you may have Lyme. Nasal swab cultures can help us look for mold and bacteria in the nasal passages, and so many more labs. So when we do a really thorough assessment, we can say, okay, what do we really need to uncover here, and what does it seem like the root cause is, and then let's prove that is really what we're trying to do. Okay. All right. So now let's see some real patient journeys. So we are looking at how we're actually getting to the root cause by using lab testing. So this was Yahira. She was a patient of mine, and this was her on day 0, and then this is her 3 months later. And so the question is, how did we get her from that day 0, she was on Dupixent, to 3 months later, we took her off Dupixent and her skin was looking really great? Well, we did some labs, right? So in that overall health assessment we told you about, one of the values that we might do is called bilirubin. And her bilirubin for me was elevated. And this is a really good example of what functional reference ranges look like. So as you can see, the reference range here is between 0.2 and 1.2 conventionally. So conventionally, it looks like her bilirubin is fine. For me, I really like this to be between 0 and 0.4 would be really optimal. Even if it was like a 0.5, 0.6, that would still be okay. But she was at a 1.1. And what happens is bilirubin really builds up when your gallbladder is blocked and you can't drain properly. So I'd like you to think of bilirubin like a bus that carries toxins out of the body. So Tori, what are some of the things that we do when we see that the bile is really congested like this? That it can indicate maybe some gallstones, some biliary congestion, some bile sludge. What are some things we do nutritionally and otherwise to support this?
Liver and gallbladder supportive foods, those cruciferous veggies, things like artichokes and beets, those are all really great for the liver and gallbladder. Liver support in general is going to be great. That's where the bile is made. And so sometimes we use supplementation or different herbs to kind of support that the bile is made in the right amount, but that it's also thin and flowy as opposed to sticky and thick, which is what we don't want. And often bile need is also correlated with constipation. We see that a lot. So like if you aren't going to the bathroom a lot, the bile's often not flowing like it should. So working on things that help you stay regular and help you go to the bathroom every day can be really helpful there as well. So there's other ways that we can, when we're working one-on-one with people, we can do different flushes and things that really support the bile. Those are things that we do with our one-on-one clients. You can use things like castor oil packs and things like that as well. That can be really useful if that's a good fit for you. So those are things that if you work with us, we're able to kind of figure out what would be the best option.
Yeah. And so for Yahira, we actually did all of the above. We supported her with some supplements to support her bile function and definitely gave her education about eating foods that promote more bile production. The standard American diet, we also call the SAD diet, the SAD diet, does actually affect your bile acids. So just by cleaning up that diet, you actually can clean up the way that your body is making the bile and the way that your liver is working. So that was extremely helpful for her. Then the gut zoomer test is one that we definitely did for her. And what you can see here is that she did have a good amount of gut inflammation. This gut inflammation that she had could be due to the food she was eating. It could also be due to the dysbiosis that she had, which is another thing that we found on this test. We saw that she had poor bile acid, which made a lot of sense with that bilirubin level being high. So that's why we were able to give her some support for creating more bile acids. And then we did see leaky gut, which as we can see on the gut zoomer test here, the zonulin levels were elevated. Those zonulin levels tell us about the leaky gut and how leaky the system is. We see that she also had fecal anti-gliadin antibodies, which means she was having inflammation from gluten. So she had to take the gluten out. And then we see that her immune system is really activated. So these are all things that we could actually provide support on to heal her system. We saw dysbiosis. So she had some bugs that were high, some bugs that were low, and her good bacteria was low, specifically Lactobacillus rhamnosus and Bifidobacterium longum. And these two bacteria, Tori, why do we like to have these in good amounts? What do these specific bacteria do for our bodies to help us out?
Yeah, both of these are extremely important. Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium longum are the good guys. Those are, like I said that earlier, the good generals in the army. They actually help us to break down certain things in our foods, things like oxalates, which are things that shouldn't be built up in our gut, so they can help kind of degrade things that shouldn't be there. They help the immune system, so they're really important. When you're bottomed out, it also kind of just paves a path for the bacteria that shouldn't be there to kind of have room to grow. And so we really want to make sure that we bring back balance so that it kind of crowds out what shouldn't be there and encourages, just a better all around, balanced ecosystem. Because that's really what it is, truly is an ecosystem.
And sometimes we think that, balancing out our good bacteria is just about taking probiotics, but it's actually more than that, right? So, in our diets, what are some things we can do to just promote that good bacteria without taking probiotics?
Well, fiber, first of all, is wonderful for promoting the right kind of bacteria in the gut. We can take prebiotic foods, which is like food that feeds the good bacteria. It's like food for that bacteria. Artichokes is a great example of a prebiotic food. You can actually eat foods that have natural probiotics, things that are fermented. That's not always the best fit for people at the beginning of their journey, but that's definitely farther down the line a great way to kind of replenish the store of good bacteria is by having things that are fermented, sauerkraut. You can even kind of get into that and learn how to ferment your own foods, and that's pretty easy and a great thing you can do for your gut health. So those are all different ways that we can change the balance there. But the fruits and veggies are going to be crucial to balancing the bacteria in the gut.
Yeah, so I think we don't always understand that it's not just about taking the probiotics.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's typically in our diet. It's what we're putting in our mouths. So even just starting there can be really helpful. The other thing that we found on the kind of general assessment testing is that she was positive for her autoimmune disease screen. Now, for autoimmune disease, we often think that this is mostly genetic, but really 30% of autoimmune disease is the genetic part. We might be predisposed for that autoimmune condition or that autoimmune trigger. But 70% of all autoimmune disease is actually due to environmental factors, toxic chemicals, dietary components, gut dysbiosis, and infections. So it's really 70% of an autoimmune condition is actually within our hands. And this is where this testing really comes into play. What is triggering the autoimmune condition is the question. And this is where all this testing can answer that question for us. So even though we might be predisposed genetically, if we are able to fix the toxic chemicals, the dietary components, the dysbiosis, the infections that we have in our system, that genetic predisposition just stays there. It does not necessarily trigger and become active. So this is where it's so important. And I think when you go to your conventional doc and you have an autoimmune condition, you're just told, oh, there's nothing you can do. You just have to take a medication for the rest of your life. And that's not what we see. We see that we can actually do something about this. Okay. Other tests that were positive for her, she did have high eosinophil count. And so that is indicating a high inflammatory process. It can also indicate, other infections like parasites and things like that. And then one thing that is really related to eczema and inflammatory conditions, autoimmune disease, is a low vitamin D count. So she had a really low, it was at a 19. We want that to be between 45 and 75 would be great. And that is really important for an optimal immune function. So that was something we also wanted to supplement with. And then, of course, going outside and getting in the sun can be really important for supporting optimal vitamin D. So this was her before. She had what we call TSW, topical steroid withdrawal. And then this is her a year later, still looking really good. All right. The next person on our list is Jimmy. And Jimmy came to us and really had no idea what was going on, but we ran a mycotoxin panel, which is part of the total tox burden test. And we did find mold toxins. And the main mold toxin we found was a black mold. Tori, what do we do nutritionally when we see that there's mold in the system and there are mycotoxins?
Yeah, Jimmy had quite the journey for sure. The black mold is a more serious toxin, so we just want to be careful about the foods that you're choosing. If you do have mycotoxins in the system, so any of the foods that can be like higher in mycotoxins, for example, coffee is not that well known that has a lot of mycotoxins. I feel like a lot of people don't know that, but that's one that is really common, that is super high often in mycotoxins. And so that's something to be aware of. But there can be grains. There even can be the way that you're storing certain food to be careful Berries, for example, are wonderful and nutritious, but you need to be really careful about how they're stored and how quickly you're eating them and the quality of them. And then when it comes to mold, we're also just careful about fungal and yeast in general because they can often kind of be partners. And so the sugars would be a big culprit to kind of feed into that as well. So that would be something to be more careful of for sure.
Yeah, and so this is Jimmy 4 months later. The black mold was cleared. He did have to move out and get the home
Mhm.
remediated. And then he also did a bunch of cleansing with us and also changing the diet and taking some supplements to clear that mold. And as you can see, super happy at the end here. This is a 5-year-old who had one of the most severe eczema conditions I had ever seen. There are food sensitivities we found here. And then, of course, related to that was the leaky gut. We found dysbiosis, and we found that she was actually having poor bile production. So we worked on all that, and this is her 5 months later. This is a 1-year-old, and in this 1-year-old, we did find in the total tox burden, there were actually a lot of heavy metals. There were a lot of mycotoxins. And so we actually had to hunt for this, and we found that their home had mold, and then we found mold in the clothes. So she actually had to clean out and clear out all of the clothes and change literally everything out that was porous. And after we did that, and after we did some really gentle cleansing, which with a little one like this, we tend to do really gentle cleansing through homeopathic remedies and really gentle herbs and things like that. She was able to clear it. And we are just seeing her ankle here, but she actually had that eczema in a bunch of other spots on her body. This is a another person who also had TSW. This was her in the beginning. What we found with her is we found a Shiga-like toxin, E. coli, and those are her initial labs on the left. And then we cleared them, and those are the final labs where this is cleared, and this is her in the beginning and the end. So we really had to clear that up in order to clear the eczema. So oftentimes there is a pathogen that could be causing the eczema and triggering it to happen. And so she's representing that. So, if you are interested in doing lab testing, you have a couple of different options with us at Cleanbody. We do have an option to get direct labs. So you can go to the link in my bio and click order labs. And there's 4 tests that you are able to order directly. And then it does come with a discovery consultation so that we can kind of guide you in terms of what's the next steps for you, depending on what we found on the labs. And then you also can work with us instead of ordering those labs first. You see us first and do a discovery consultation where then we will kind of say, okay, here are the labs that might be helpful for you. And if we work together, we're going to order all of these and then we'll assess those for you. And we can help you to determine what the best labs are. So if you are interested in meeting with us for that discovery consultation, you are actually going to meet me directly. It will be 30% off the discovery consultation if you use our code IGDC30, and the link is in my bio. And there is actually a 100% money back guarantee on this discovery consultation. So if you decide at the end of that consultation that you really haven't gotten a lot of information about how to understand the root cause of your symptoms, then you can ask for your money back. All right. You can also order those labs directly, as I said. And right now we have a code LABIG that'll give you $100 off. So click the link in my bio to order labs. All right. I would love to open it up for questions. As a reminder, all of this information on today's IG Live is for informational and educational purposes only. This is not medical advice. If you want the advice medically or nutritionally, please think about booking a consultation with us so we can give you that direct advice or consider getting a lab so we can get started and just kind of see what's going on with you and look at the root causes. All right. So we would love to answer any questions right now. We are talking about lab testing today. And so if you guys have any questions about lab testing, we would love to answer those. So please go ahead and submit them into the comments box. If you have any other questions about anything else, we're also happy to answer those as well. If you're dealing with an issue and you're kind of wondering, I wonder how we should delve into this and understand it a little bit more, you can ask about that as well too. Tori, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this is an important topic because I think a lot of times we go to our doctor and we kind of think that we're getting the entire evaluation that we are supposed to be getting, but we're not actually getting that evaluation the way we should. So I think it can be a really important topic. Have you seen this, Tori, before, where someone might come to you and they kind of think, yeah, I've already gotten all those tests, but then it's really a very bare minimum?
Oh, all the time. The testing's just a little bit different. And I know we've kind of talked through that, but it kind of just spans so many areas. For example, thyroid testing, what's typically done in a conventional medicine picture is usually like one of the blood tests where we do probably about 4 or 5 different blood tests to look at the same thing, but from different angles. So the stool tests are the same. I've heard that a few times. People have gone to like a GI doctor and had some kind of stool test done, maybe through like a local lab where you get your blood drawn, and those just aren't looking at the microbiome in the same way. Those are looking for really specific things that if they don't show up, they're like everything's good. Where a lot of the labs that we're sending samples off to are a lot more thorough. So it's just different. But the diagnostics is so important because it kind of gives us that like test, don't guess, and lets us really, I like to look at it as like looking under the hood of a car. Like if you have a light that comes on, your check engine light comes on, and you drive to the mechanic, you're not going to say, hey, can you turn off this light for me? Or hopefully you won't. You're going to say, hey, can you pop the hood and look through my car and make a diagnosis to why the light came on? And eczema is the same thing. If, we have a skin condition or any symptom, honestly, it doesn't just have to be skin. It's our body turning on a light. And so you should want that diagnostic, under the hood look at it, as opposed to just, shutting the light off. So it's just a different way of thinking, but the lab testing is really a crucial piece of it.
Yeah, I think it can be so important to really uncover those root causes. So if you are dealing with chronic symptoms and you're feeling really lost, I think that this can really provide that light bulb moment of, oh my goodness, these are the things that are triggering my body to create these alarm
Mhm.
systems. And that's really all they are. And if you shift your mind to think about your symptoms as just alarm systems, then the next question is, why are these alarm systems going off? And these labs can really help provide that answer. So, thank you, Tori, so much for going live with me today. If you guys have any questions, you guys can DM me and I'm happy to answer those for you. And we will be live next week again talking about nutrition and eczema. So, thank you so much, Tori.